ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
Hi, I'm Brett Worthington.
And I'm Melissa Clark.
And this is The Party Room, where we take stock of the week that was in politics and we help you make sense of what's happening in Canberra and across the country.
We're in the chair while Fran Kelly and Patricia Karvelis are away. Hope you'll join us for the ride.
That's The Party Room every Thursday on the Politics Now feed in the ABC Listen app.
In Hostages Square in Tel Aviv, the crowds gathered in anticipation, waiting for confirmation that finally the 20 remaining living Israeli hostages were on their way home after more than 2 years in captivity. When it was clear Hamas had begun the process of handing over the hostages to the Red Cross, the relief was palpable. Donald Trump, who travelled to the Middle East to mark the moment and then to meet world leaders in Egypt, declared the war is over. Today, Jonathan Panikoff, director of the Scowcroft Middle East Security initiative at the Atlantic Council, on the release of the hostages and what needs to happen next to ensure the war has ended for good. I'm Sam Hawley on Gadigal land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily. Jonathan, we're speaking as Donald Trump is on his way to Israel. Now, before he departed, he basically said that the entire of the Middle East is rejoicing and that the war is over.
The war is over. The war is over, okay? You understand that?
So the Muslim and Arab countries are all cheering. Everybody's cheering at one time. That's never happened before. Usually if you have one cheering, the other isn't. The other is the opposite. It's going to be something that's never happened before.
Do you think that's a fair assessment?
I think it's certainly fair that the entirety of the region is rejoicing. Mm-hmm. Arab states, over the overwhelming majority of Israelis, I think certainly Europe, the US, wanted this war to be over for quite some time. And I think the fact that it is now is hugely positive and something that Donald Trump views as really well-deserved on his part, that he really is the one that made it happen. And I think there's some truth to that. I think whether or not the ceasefire can last long-term is a slightly different issue. The history in the region, the history between Israel and Hamas has been multiple wars and multiple skirmishes, and then periods of calm in between. And so I think there's a lot of questions related to whether or not the second phase, third phase of the 20-point plan that President Trump put in are going to come to fruition. If it does, then yes, the war may be over forever. If it doesn't, then sadly we might just be in yet another interlude in the long-running cycles of violence.
Well, in Jerusalem's Old City, images of the US and Israeli flags are being projected on the walls there. And we saw at a rally on the weekend at Tel Aviv Plaza, people chanting, "Thank you, Trump," as his Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, addressed them.
I only wish the president was here. He would love this.
And then, of course, there was booing when Steve Witkoff raised Benjamin Netanyahu's name.
To Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Oh. Okay.
What did you make of that?
I think it reflects where a lot of Israeli society is at the moment. There's wide support for President Trump and a lot of belief that he really helped to end this war, to create the ceasefire that the overwhelming majority of Israelis have wanted. And yet at the same time, those in Hostage Square have been among the most critical of Prime Minister Netanyahu, going on for the majority of the 2 years of the war, because they viewed him as prioritizing military objectives, some of which were not necessarily ever going to be possible, like destroying all of Hamas, over getting the hostages back.
Yeah, because of course the feeling was among them that this actually could have happened far sooner, that this should have happened, like a year ago?
I think that's right. I think the first year there were a number of strategic military objectives that were still at least practical to achieve. I think over the last 9 to 12 months, which you've heard, including from senior Israeli officials, from the security establishment, from the military, from the Mossad, from the ISA, Israel Security Agency, is that there really was not a meaningful military objective. Hamas's not just top tier of leadership, but top 3 tiers of leadership had all been, frankly, killed. 30 to 40% of the tunnels had been collapsed and destroyed. There just wasn't a lot left. And yet Netanyahu and his coalition made the determination to press forward on a military objective, even as you had more and more hostages' lives continue to be lost.
Well, Jonathan, let's then consider what we know now, a few days on, about how Donald Trump managed to actually get this deal done. Now, initially, he approached Benjamin Netanyahu in quite a different way, didn't he? Because he was not continually demanding a ceasefire from him. He was not joining in international calls, for one.
No, he wasn't. I mean, we saw there was the ceasefire during the transition period between Biden and Trump's presidencies. And then there was one hostage that was released, an American-Israeli dual citizen, Idan Alexander. But that was it. And it was in February, not that long ago, that there was the Trump comments about the Gaza Riviera. And there was big questions about what that would mean.
We have an opportunity to do something that could be phenomenal. And I don't want to be cute. I don't want to be a wise guy, but the Riviera of the Middle East, this could be something that could be so bad. This could be so magnificent.
Obviously, there's been huge changes since then on the ground that helped to prompt the ability and, frankly, what has been a confluence of various factors converging all at the right time that has allowed this hostage deal to happen and allowed this ceasefire to happen so that the bombing of Gaza will end as well.
And part of that was when Israel bombed a building in Qatar and killed Hamas negotiators.
Doha has been rocked by explosions after Israel launched a strike targeting senior leaders of Hamas who were in the Qatari capital.
It is a dramatic escalation of Israel's war in Gaza, which Qatar is calling a blatant violation of international laws and norms.
I'm not thrilled about the whole situation. It's not a good situation. But I will say this, we want the hostages back, but we are not thrilled about the way that went down today.
That changed things for Trump, didn't it?
I think it did. I think it helped prompt a couple of things. So one is it actually changed things on both the pressure for Israel and the pressure for Hamas side. On the pressure to Israel side, Qatar has been a close ally of the United States, and President Trump sees the Qatari emir as a close personal friend. And so he took personal umbrage with that attack. And the fact that it also failed so spectacularly and was such a strategic mistake by Netanyahu, I think gave President Trump additional leverage in a way that he didn't feel like he previously had. To President Trump's credit, though, he also took it and put that same leverage in terms of how he dealt with Hamas vis-a-vis the Arab negotiators. So for quite a while, there was frustration that the Arab negotiators were not coalescing as well as they should have been, that there wasn't sufficient pressure. And so you had the Emiratis and the Egyptians and the Qataris, and very importantly, the Turks actually come together. And for instance, you saw the Turks play a direct role for the first time in these hostage negotiations. And that pressure, I think, had a big impact on Hamas as well, because it felt like it didn't have a previous ally of it to now turn to try to gain support or to be able to hold out further. So I think there was a confluence here, but much of it does go back to Qatar and to that strike.
All right, well, Jonathan, for now the strikes on Gaza have come to an end. The guns have been silenced, as they say. But let's consider in more depth how long that might last, whether this could actually be an enduring peace. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu, in a televised address, he called the moment a historic event, but he says the campaign is not over.
This is an historic event that is tinged with sadness over the release of murderers and joy over the return of our hostages. There are still some very big security challenges ahead of us. Some of our enemies are trying to regroup in order to attack us again. And as we say here, we're on it.
So what does he mean by that, do you think?
Prime Minister Netanyahu always had two requirements for the war ending. One was that all the hostages be returned, but the second requirement had long been that Hamas disarm. And we know this is one of Trump's 20 points in his plan. And so I think there's going to be a lot of questions now about what happens next. If this is the totality of the agreement, if after the hostages are released and Israel goes back as it already has to the lines it's agreed to, there's no more pressure by the U.S., no more pressure by Arab states on Hamas, then I think it's likely that it may be a year, maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years, but eventually we're going to see, once again, the cycle of violence restart. But if Arab states and Turkey remain committed to really pressuring Hamas to give up weapons, if they remain committed to Hamas, at least some of the members, being expelled, and there's a commitment as well for the Palestinian Authority to reform as it should, so that it can eventually take the role of governance in the Gaza Strip in a way Prime Minister Netanyahu has always been skeptical of. Well, that's going to take pressure as well from the United States and the international community. Well, then maybe you really do get to a point where this horrific war ends up being the last in the cycle. I think for the Israelis, one of the fears that's probably not getting enough discussion is that among what they're really concerned about is not just so much Hamas ruling Gaza again. There's actually something worse in their minds, and that is Hamas having what was a Hezbollah-like veto power. So for years, Hezbollah in Lebanon didn't have any responsibility for the government, giving it an excuse for everything that went wrong, but was able to veto and prevent the government from doing anything, whether socially, whether on the economic side, certainly militarily. I think if Hamas ends up in that role, where they have a veto power but no responsibility, a lot of Israelis feel like it's going to be even worse because it makes it even harder, frankly, to be able to point the finger, to be able to get after them. And that's something to watch out for as well.
All right, well, with these world leaders gathering in Egypt this week, including, of course, Donald Trump, what do you think their priority then needs to be?
I think the first priority is ensuring that the humanitarian aid and the opening of the 5 crossings and the 400 trucks minimum per day are getting through as quickly as possible. And I think after that, it's going to be questions on how do we move to phase 2? How do you get to a point where the international security forces that are envisioned in the 20-point plan actually come into Gaza? Because if that doesn't happen, then Israel is going to say it has to default back into doing security itself to protect its own borders. I think those are all factors that are going to be part of this discussion.
All right. Well, Jonathan, as he was boarding Air Force One, Donald Trump said he might one day visit Gaza, and he is very confident that peace will hold.
Are you confident that the ceasefire is going to hold?
I think so. I think it's going to hold. I think people are a lot of reasons why it's going to hold, but I think people are tired of it. It's been centuries, okay? Not just recent. It's been centuries. I think people are tired of it. Yeah, the ceasefire is going to hold.
Of course, we all hope that it does hold, but even if it does, Jonathan, the cost of this for the Palestinians and Israelis, it's just been huge, hasn't it?
It's been absolutely horrific. Regardless of the numbers that you believe, the accuracy or not, there's tens of thousands of people dead in Gaza. That's hard to even fathom. There are hostages whose families have frankly been held, certainly those that are alive still and those that are dead, who have been held now, frankly, in purgatory for 2 years, waiting for them to come home from Gaza. And so I think, to President Trump's credit, what I will say is, look, it's true the second phase of a deal, third phase, hasn't been fully worked out. There's a lot of question marks. But he also was able to accomplish something that hadn't been previously, and that it was worthwhile, I think, to say, okay, even without knowing what comes the next day or the next week, just stopping this war, getting the hostages home, giving humanitarian aid, a massive increase in Gaza so that people can go back to at least some of the areas in which they're from and can survive. I think that was the first requirement. And yes, it's something we're going to worry about tomorrow. That will come very soon. But I think everybody should rejoice for what has been a cessation of Israeli bombing in the hostages being released.
Jonathan Panikoff is the director of the Scowcroft Middle East Security initiative at the Atlantic Council. This episode was produced by Sydney Peed, Cinnamon Nippard and Jessica Wukyanov. Audio production by Sam Dunn. Our supervising producer is David Cody. I'm Sam Hawley. Thanks for listening.